Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Tales from the Doghouse Separation Anxiety Explained. I am Stacey Bell, and with me today is...
Hello, I am Ness Jones, and Chase is here with me from Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded. And today we are talking about, Stacey,
Woo! We are talking about when your dog starts to get anxious before you even leave the house or leave the door. So
that's a big one. Yeah,
it is a big one.
So I think maybe before we talk about why and what to do about it, we should talk about what it might look like to somebody.
Yes,
as in what kind of behaviors the dog might display or do. So yes, because we know they're watching us all the time. They're so observant. They know exactly what you put on, whether they're coming with you. I actually, funny story, on Sunday, which it's like on the weekend, I mowed the lawn for the very first time in my entire life. And with the snippet, we did it together, my husband and I, and swapping over, but he had to show me how to do the lawn mowing because I've never done it. Anyway, but the shoes, because he does it with thongs or flip-flops, whatever you want to call them, and I'm not talking about a G-string, by the way. They're called thongs here. They're called jandals.
I know,
they're called flip-flops.
Had this image of your husband mowing the lawn
and a G-string.
And I'm like,
No. But the shoes I put on to do it, because I put proper shoes in my feet, because I used to work with a guy that actually chopped off all his toes
with a lawnmower.
Yeah.
Ooh,
he topped, and one of them was on one foot, and one of them was his big toe. He had to learn how to walk again. Anyway, so I'm like, I'm going to be very careful and put proper shoes on. But the shoes I put on are the shoes I only ever use to walk the dogs. And they were like, "Oh, we're going out for a walk." I'm like, "No, we're not."
JK, I'm just mowing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, but so they know exactly what clothes we put on, whether they're coming with us or not. Yeah.
Right. So some of the behaviors that my clients have talked about seeing in their dogs that are triggered by pre-departure cues, and what we mean by pre-departure cues or PDQs are just things that you do prior to leaving that trigger your dog to know that you're leaving. So some of your pre-departure cues may make your dog excited, like Ness putting on her shoes that she usually uses for walks, or picking up a leash, or your dog's harness or something like that might make your dog excited. But then there are other cues like putting on your work shoes or a briefcase or a backpack or your purse or your keys or jacket or whatever. So those things might cause your dog to show signs of anxiety. So that's what a pre-departure cue is. It just cues your dog into your leaving. And so I think a really common one is pacing and panting. Those are the ones I think my clients see the most. But maybe also whining is another kind of low-key one that my clients see as a super common one.
I think also hypervigilance, like they're like, oh, that's like, I also heard of literal trembling, like and tails tugs, stuff like that. Just getting back to the pre-departure cues, it's really good if you can identify what they are, and sometimes they're quite weird things. So I've had somebody that took their lunch out of the fridge to go to work. I mean, you wouldn't think that taking lunch out of the fridge would be a trigger, but obviously for women it could be uniform, it could be putting on makeup or blow drying your hair. For some people it could be something as simple as putting on deodorant. Or I've got a client that the dog is, just all those kind of leaving cues, like getting up, going, all the stuff you would do before you leave the house, shutting the back door, Putting on deodorant, doing hair,
filling a water bottle or a to-go, like if you have a to-go mug for your coffee or tea, or a water bottle or something that you usually bring with you when you leave. I know for my dog, it's, I fill my water lots of times through the day, but there's something different about how I fill my water when I'm getting ready to leave. I'm not sure what it is.
You haven't figured it out.
Different. And he's like, she's leaving. Which,
interesting.
It is interesting. And that's a really another point is if your dog is getting anxious before you leave and you're not quite sure what's triggering your dog, filming it, your leaving routine is a really good way to kind of be able to separate yourself enough from it to be able to observe what is it that my dog is reacting to.
I wonder if it could be something as simple as if they were coming with you, you might be like talking to them a little bit or paying them a little bit more attention. Whereas if you're getting ready to leave, you probably might ignore them a little bit more because you're concentrating on, focusing on what
you need to bring with you.
And they're smart enough to recognize the difference just between those subtle things.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah. And usually when I'm bringing Rowan with me, because like his stuff, like meaning his collar and his leash and everything are by the front door, but we leave out the side door, which is through the kitchen. So if he's coming with me, I would put on his collar and everything and then go through the kitchen. But if I'm just going through the kitchen without him, without having put it on his collar first, then he's not coming with me. So he does know that. He does know that difference.
Yeah. They're so smart. They're so observant. And you could just literally be your body language. Like, who knows? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But now your homework, Stacey Bell, if you choose to accept it, is to identify the difference.
Yeah. Why is filling my water bottle like the same one? It's not like it's a different container. So I'll have to look at that. I do have a camera, so I could set that up and look at it.
Yeah. Interesting. So we've got things like hypervigilance, as you said, pacing, maybe a whine, maybe trembling if it's really severe, tail tucks,
ears back. Like, how they pull some dogs, it's funny, they'll pull their ears back, like kind of pin them back, and others do that kind of airplane ears.
Yeah.
I'm doing demonstrations for those who are watching on YouTube. So just knowing what your dog's anxious ears look like is important. So when we talk about vigilance, I think that's a good one to kind of pick apart, because it can look slightly different in different dogs, but mainly what we're looking at there is the dog noticing your movements and, reacting in some way. So some dogs might do like quick head turns, or like, so they're really watching you, or you might like stand up and they might like have been resting and they like just jump up onto their feet. And so what you're usually seeing is like a bigger than normal reaction to your movements. What would you add to that, Ness?
Maybe they could just be glued to your side. Like, I know you're going to leave me. I'm glued here. And you just jogged my memory too about something else. So some dogs, this is not to do with vigilance, by the way, but some dogs will try to elicit play with you. So they might pick up a toy and they'll be like, hey.
Yes.
Because they don't want you to leave. So they're like, well, maybe I can distract you.
Distract her.
Yeah. But vigilance could be, just that kind of watching you walk around the room. Like they might not even get up, but they could just be
following you with their head or their eyes or Right.
Yeah. I know mine do. I mean, mine watch. They're always watching me. Yeah. Some dogs are, aren't they? Yeah. Even when they're asleep, you see that little eyelid go up. where are they going? Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's true. And Rowan is one of those dogs who like follows me around the house. So,
if I go into a different room, he'll follow me even if he has been sleeping, which isn't a problem for me. So I don't do anything about it, but it's different because he's not doing it because he's anxious. And so kind of looking at the behavior in context, right? So looking at your dog's body language, any behaviors that they're showing, as well as, the following is again, not a problem unless it's stemming from anxiety. And then we'll address that.
Yeah. So I'm the same as, my dog's the same as Rowan. Like I get up, they're like, oh, where are we going? We're coming with you. Are you going to the kitchen? Are we going outside? And they're
fingers crossed for the kitchen.
We really like cheese. So they are opportunists, and they do want to be, they're social animals too. We've got to remember that. So don't worry about it if they're following you around the house. It's the context is important if they're getting anxious before you leave. So first things we need to do is determine what pre-departure cues you have before you leave, and also what your dog does pertinent to them.
Right. So for example, if your dog gets anxious when you pick up the keys, then we would account for that in training. If your dog is neutral or doesn't care when you pick up the keys, that's not something, just because it predicts your departure doesn't mean it's going to matter to your dog, right? So that's a really important factor in like what pre-departure cues matter to your dog, because if they don't matter, then we don't have to work with them in training. Yeah.
And also so some more subtle signs that your dog might be like not so much anxious but just a bit bummed out, for a better word. You might see some lip licking or some yawning and that sort of behavior. Mine just look disappointed.
Yeah.
They just like look at me like, we're disappointed in you.
Yeah. My good friend has a standard poodle, and so her tail is usually like kind of up. And like as soon as she realizes that she's not coming, her tail just whoop. And she doesn't have separation related behaviors, but it's like a clear sign that she's disappointed that she's not coming. And it's like, it kind of hurts your feelings for her. But I think that's really common. I think most dogs are disappointed when we're not taking them with them. But for her, it's just so clear because her tail is so up, and she's like, and then it's like,
It's like they're on hydraulics, isn't it? It kind of goes,
yeah, exactly. So,
that's so cute.
Anyways,
so I guess what we need to do is then talk about if you're seeing signs of anxiety, your dog's reacting to your departures, how to address them.
Yeah. So for all of the pre-departure cues that are avoidable, meaning we can avoid them.
Really? Is that what that means?
Right. I'm on my game today, I swear. So for the ones that are avoidable, we would avoid them to start out with. And the reason why we do that is that it makes it easier for your dog to be successful in home alone training. So we do that to give them traction, a place to start with home alone training. And then later on, we'll add those back in. But to start out with, we just drop them if we can.
Yeah. So for example, we can put keys into pockets or handbags an hour before. If we're putting keys into a handbag, maybe we could put the handbag in the car an hour before or something like that. Yeah. And I always think, like, if they're avoidable, do they actually ever need to be put back into the training too? I mean, some dogs will cope with that very well, but if they're completely avoidable, why even make it more complicated?
Yeah. And for some things, that's no problem. For other things, it kind of depends on, there's like always this combination of priorities, how much of a pain it is, how reactive to it your dog is. A lot of times what we find is that, when we reintroduce those cues, later on that they're not a big deal anymore.
Yeah.
So that that keys equals scary absences has been broken. That link has been broken.
The association.
So, yeah, the association has been broken. So, for a lot of times it's not a big deal, but sometimes when we do try to reintroduce them, if they still are a big deal, then the client just determines, do I want to work through this, or do I want to keep on kind of managing that by putting the keys in my pocket, for example?
Yeah. And there's some things that just aren't avoidable. So if you are literally going out, you can't, maybe you need to lock up the house, lock up the back door or something like that.
Yeah. And a lot of the doors, particularly like in apartments and stuff, like the doors will automatically lock.
Yeah.
And so you have no control, like you can't not make it lock, right? I guess you could. Somebody was telling me if you put like a piece of tape around it, it won't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but so there are things that you do have to work through on the front end, and one of those, like for fair number of dogs, is the door itself, right? So that can be, sometimes we can change which door you go out of, and maybe that other door wouldn't have the emotional baggage that the initial door does have, but
so maybe you have to go out the front door, maybe you live in an apartment and you only have that choice, but you also don't want to leave your balcony door open, because people can climb up into balconies and get in there, so you still have to lock the back door, or lock the balcony door. So that's, for me, unavoidable. It has to be added back into the training at some point. But if you were just on little times initially, then you could avoid doing it. So I've had definitely had clients in the past where we haven't factored it in till the dogs build up some nice, solid foundational time in their home alone absence. And then, as you say, we added it back in, and that hasn't really had as much value as what it would have.
Right. Yeah, that's
started
what
with
it.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah. So dropping the pre-departure cues is one way to kind of help. Another way is to change some of the parts of the leaving routine. And that certainly can involve some of the pre-departure cues, but it also can be, like we were just talking about, which door you leave from. It can also be where the dog hangs out while you're leaving. So, sometimes it's just about making it look different than it used to look. And that change will many times have the dog consider this to be different than those past scary absences, which is what makes all that stuff powerful, changing kind of that antecedent arrangement.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So if you can change it up, I guess is how you want to address it. And if you can't, then if you can get away with not adding it back into your training regimen straight away, do that. Otherwise, it really comes down to a sort of desensitization protocol if it's impossible to remove for whatever reason. Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, things like that could be, if you live in a house with a garage roller door, at some point you have to add that back in. I mean, actually you can avoid that at the beginning anyway, because you could just have it up for quite some time. But there are things that are pretty much unavoidable. Well, just going out the front door, for example, is unavoidable. So we do desensitization around that, or the back door, or whatever door you leave by. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And we're looking for, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're looking for the dog to be non-reactive or bored with whatever it is, whatever the cue is. But if with pre-departure cues, I never add them in at the beginning. I just complicates training so much. Yeah,
it does, and it can make, I guess, it can make the separation anxiety training feel more like a slog.
Yeah,
if we're having to work through all of those cues before you can even get out the door. Now that like we're saying, like sometimes there are some cues that you have to work through, but if there were like 5 or 10 things that were bothering your dog and you had to work through all of those and then start desensitizing movement towards the door and then getting out the door, then you can see what matters to people is getting out the door, right? Like that's the goal, is getting out the door. So if you have to put your keys in your pocket 20 minutes before you train, like most people are happy to do that, right? So they can start getting out the door. And then like we were talking about, sometimes when we reintroduce it, the association of the keys with scary absences is totally broken and we don't have to do any work, right? So it's kind of a more efficient way to train, even if we have to do work when we introduce them. What I find is that the trigger is not as intense, right? Like, so it might be like, "Ooh, that's a little scary." And we're like, no, look how we're doing this nice and easy. And they're like, "Oh, okay, that's no big deal."
Yeah, I've done this before. Hang on. And they fall back on that foundational training. Yeah. I've actually just I've got a client, shout out to Jackie and her dog Isla, who is very, very cute. Mini Schnauzer. Yeah. And one of her dogs, so they've got a gravel driveway. The sound of the car on the gravel was problematic for the dog, and we didn't add that back in so we added in a whole bunch of other stuff, and we've left that till last. And she's killing it. Awesome. Just doing
good.
Like, I don't care.
Yeah. That's really nice. That's really nice when you take something. I mean, like even for me, like I've seen so many times that exact thing where like it used to be something that was so triggering. And so when you're reintroducing it, like in my mind, I know there have been so many instances of me helping a client reintroduce something and it not being a big deal. But then every time there's something big, you're kind of like, oh, but what if? But like I'm saying, it's really, for most dogs, it's just the association has been broken, so it's not a big deal anymore.
And that's such a big thing, because maybe we should talk about associations. Dogs associate; they join dots that maybe shouldn't be there, unfortunately, but you can understand why they do so. An example outside of that is I had a client years ago, and the dog didn't want to have the harness on. Just was like, I don't want anything to do with that. Turns out when it was a puppy, she was in her garage, she was putting the harness on, got the harness on, and then she was walking out the door, and the door slammed quite badly on the dog, to the point of screaming, and like it was nasty. Didn't want to bar off the harness after that. So it's joined that association. So that's right. How it kind of works. That's a really good example of a dog joining an association. The harness had nothing to do with the dog, but
right. Yeah. But the way that memory was made, it was like, that's what happened right before.
Yeah. So with a separation anxiety dog, the association is, maybe it's the keys or the handbag or whatever it is. They've joined an association. They see that thing. You walk out the door. They go over threshold. They have a scary absence. And therefore, those two things are connected in their mind. And if we don't have the scary thing in their program for quite a while, build up some nice foundational time, add it back in, that association doesn't hopefully exist anymore. Or as you say, it's weaker than what it was. It's not as strong.
Right. Yeah. And dogs do that all the time for so many things. And it just helps them predict what is next. What's happening next. And they joined all these things together that, like, in a lot of cases, it does have some really good predictive value, but in some cases, like with the harness that Ness was talking about, not so much. But yeah.
Yeah. And with my clients, I get them to obviously identify what their pre-departure cues might be, but then I also get them to rate them from 1 to 10. So 1 being the least scary, 10 being the most scary. And then when we add them back in, if there's several of them, we'll start with the ones that are the least scary first.
Yeah. I do the same. Start with the least scary ones. Yeah. So the other type of cues that that we can actually add in, because there've been a few studies that show that, when dogs know what's coming next, even if it's not something that they love, it does decrease their anxiety. So some of the things that we can do in that case is add something in to let the dog know that the home alone exercise is starting, or that you're leaving for a safe absence. So, or that for dogs that really anticipate or might have some FOMO or frustration regarding you leaving without them, having kind of a dichotomy there. Like, if I put your harness on, you're coming with, and if not, you're not, so that they know which kind of scenario to expect. But as far as safe leaving cues, you can use something, a verbal phrase, be right back.
I'll be back.
I'll be back. Or something like that. Or you can use something visual. Sometimes people will set something out. I have not used that a lot with my clients.
I've got one of my clients does, yeah.
Yeah.
She
So
puts
you
a ribbon
can do that
out.
too.
Yeah. I was talking to a lady the other day, and we were talking about what to say when you walk out the door. And I'm like, well, you can say, be right back. I said, I say to my dogs, I put on my best Arnie voice and I'll be back. Or I tell them I'm going hunting if I'm going shopping. But I said, you just choose something that makes you smile when you walk out the door. So, you're not worrying about how they're going to react. And I think we settled on bananas. She said, yeah, I'm going to say bananas when I walk out the door. I'm like, okay.
You're like, all right, go for it, man.
Because it makes you smile. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you say as long as you're consistent, right? Because what you're trying to help is your dog to link that phrase or that visual cue or whatever it is to a safe absence, right? So it's kind of got to be the same every time. But otherwise, I like the idea of using something, like you said, something that makes you smile or feel a little bit lighthearted or.
Yeah. Because, if you are worried about your dog when you leave, they're going to pick up on that. So it could impact them. So yeah, if you're like smiley, happy, lighthearted.
Bananas.
Yeah. Elephants, anything. It's making me smile. So first of all, you guys, you need to identify what your pre-departure cues are, identify what your dog does when they see them or when you're leaving. So if you can tell if your dog is actually anxious or perhaps just disappointed. We're very disappointed in you. Oh dear. Yes. And then, work on a program, work on your desensitization and add them back in nice and slowly with the least scary one first. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss another exciting episode of Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained. And if you are listening to us in your ears, please subscribe, give us a review if you feel that way inclined. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm Ness Jones from Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded.
And I am Stacey Bell with Focused Fun.
See ya.
Bye.